Citizens of Gotham, before we get started with our episode, let's take a moment to recognize our partner sponsor, Organic Priced Books. Now, if you're listening to this, I'd be willing to bet you enjoy comic books. If you do, much like myself, you probably love seeing your favorite runs and stories collected in an edition that you can proudly put on your shelf. These collected editions are wonderful to read and display, but man can they be pricey. This is where Organic Priced Books comes in. Organic Priced Books is a small, family-owned business dedicated to getting you those collected editions of comics that you love at great prices. They have an expansive online store where you can browse, pre-order, and purchase from their in-stock items. Not only do they carry the major companies, such as DC and Marvel, but they also carry other brands such as IDW, Boom Studios, Image, Dark Horse, and more. They also package these books with amazing care, so they show up to your door in pristine condition. So head down to the link in the description of this episode and visit Organic Priced Books today. Also in that description, you'll find our promo codes. The first is tfrbatpod to get you $2 off of any order, and the second, tfrbatpod Ship It Together, to save you 5% off of any order of 3 or more books. Check out all the offerings that Organic Priced Books has, save money, and support TFR as you do so. Thanks to Organic Priced Books for supporting us. Now let's get on with the episode. Welcome, citizens of Gotham, to The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast focusing on all things The Dark Knight and the DC Universe. If you'd like to connect with the show, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads. Just search tfrbatpod. And if you have thoughts, questions, comments, or even suggestions for future episodes of the show, you can reach us by email. Just shoot those to tfrbatpod@gmail.com. My name is Eric Carter, and I am your host, and I am joined, as always, by my partner and co-host, Joe Fornerado. Joe, how are you, my friend?
Good, Eric. How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well. We've got a great time to record. It all worked out. We're within schedule. What's going on, man?
Yeah, the kids have been a lot, knock on wood. The kids have been really good with their routines at night lately, and they wake up early as hell. So, but they go to bed normal. So I'll take the trade-off there. But yeah, it makes it a little easier to record. Not wait for them to go to bed to record.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, we are here for a it's not an anniversary or anything, which is kind of our MO, but it's kind of topical, and we'll get there. We're going to talk about the main event, which if you saw the thumbnail, you know what the episode is. But before we get there, I did want to discuss, we are one episode away. This is our final episode before our big 100th episode, which is crazy. Can you believe we've almost done 100 of these things, Joe?
I know it's nuts, and it feels like we just started this thing. It feels like, trying to come up with like what we were gonna do, and we're still coming up, on a monthly basis, trying to figure out what we're gonna cover and everything like that. But yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, it's crazy, and it's been what, 4 years you said, or 3 years?
Four years this month.
Yeah, that's I think even harder to comprehend, the 4 years than the 100. But yeah, it's we made it to 99.
We did. As long, Lord willing, we will be here for our 100th in a couple
Yeah.
of weeks. But we do have a plan for that. So we toss back and forth ideas of what to do for our 100th episode. And it kind of hit me out of the blue with all the things we've done on the show in now 99 episodes. we've never ranked the Batman films proper.
Hmm.
So I threw that idea to Joe, and when I texted it to you, you were like, "We haven't done that." So
Yeah,
it's
I was surprised.
surprising. Yeah, I mean we've done the animated films. We did those with the guys over at Holy Batcast, but we've never done the live action Batman films. So that's what we're gonna do for our 100th episode. So I wanted to give everybody kind of a heads up on what we're going to do early. And just to preface, so this is not going to include any animated films. So things like Batman Mask of the Phantasm, unfortunately, are eliminated from this. This is going to be live action theatrical films. So starting with Batman 1966 all the way up to the Batman from 2022. That's going to be our list. We're going to rank those. And unfortunately, that also does mean that we're not going to include the serials because, I mean, yes, they were shown at, I guess, movie theaters, but they were chopped up and
Yeah.
we're not going to cover those. But I wanted to give you guys a heads up in advance for that because I would really love for our 100th episode to have some interaction and feedback from you, the listeners. So I'm tasking you. You've got, we release bi-weekly for the most part. So
Ish.
within the next ish, so within the next 2 weeks, you can. I'm gonna post. I'm gonna make a post about it on all of our socials. You can respond in that post. You can send us emails. You can send us direct messages. However you'd like to do it. I want your ranking of the live action Batman films. And we'll tabulate those into the show. And once Joe and I are finished with our rankings, we'll discuss the listener ratings. I'm going to do some math on this one. I'm taking a leaf out of Andy DiGenova's books. He loves it. He loves building spreadsheets. I am not a fan of it, but you know what? I'm going to do it for you guys. I'm going to do it for the listeners. So I'll calculate everything that we get, and we'll talk about the listener ratings as well. With that being said, and this is not a cheap plug, if you don't want to, don't feel any pressure to do so. But if you have anything from our 100 episodes that you'd like to bring up or discuss, please absolutely send that, and we'll read it on the show. Whether again that be emails or direct messages, or posts, or comments on our posts or whatever. But Joe, that's the plan for next time. That's for our 100th episode. But here today, we're here to talk about a, I don't even think it's just restricted to modern classic at this point. It's just a classic Batman story. And that is Batman Hush. All right, Joe. So the reason we're covering Hush today is because Hush is pretty topical in the news right now. As of this month, March of 2025. In fact, I think the first issue drops the 25th of this month, which should be next week as we're recording this. We have Batman Hush 2 coming, and they've gotten the band back together. We have Jeph Loeb, Jim Lee, Scott Williams. It's the old crowd. They're back together to do a follow-up, a sequel to Batman Hush. So I figured, what a better time to discuss the original story than right now as the new one is about to come out. So Batman Hush was released throughout the Batman title from October of 2002 to September of 2003. So it's over 20 years old now, which is mind-boggling. But I said I don't even consider this a modern classic anymore. I just put this in the classic Batman story realm. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, I think this is one that comes up every time classic Batman stories comes up. And like you said,
Yeah.
now it's over 20 years old. So yeah, it's no longer considered modern, I think, sadly.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, it is considered the modern era, but yeah, when it's over 20 years old already, wow, it's like it's almost nostalgic.
yeah, yeah. Speaking that, that's such a weird thing too with the timelines in comics. You have the Silver Age,
Yeah,
Bronze
you
Age.
can't really name it the modern era when it's no longer literally the definition of modern, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when are they going to chunk off a certain period of time between, you know, the 80s and now and say
Yeah.
this was an era?
Yep.
I don't
I
know
don't
who
know.
decides those things anyway. And what would you call it? The millennial era? I don't even know.
I it's funny because I almost consider it now like you got the 90s era and then you got the pre-New 52 era. That's kind of what I refer to it as. Like
Completely
pre and post.
excluding any Marvel readers.
Well, yeah. I don't even think about that when it comes to the eras. Do they use the same eras? I don't even know.
I think so because
I didn't realize that. Okay.
they've got like Silver Age Marvel as well. So,
Okay.
but either way, so
Well, so I'm
again,
gonna throw you for a loop real quick because
okay.
it just occurred to me while you were talking. Like you said, they got the whole band back together again to do this. Ironically, Jeph Loeb is part of another big sequel series that's happening right now. Is it still going on? Is the Long Halloween sequel series still going on?
Yes.
So isn't that kind of weird? They're both going to be happening. Uh, was that simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
Because that
So
one doesn't end until October, right?
I believe so. Now, yes, but I'm sure the outline and everything is because I mean that was a
Oh yeah, no, no,
long
no. I just mean
gestating
it. I don't mean as
project.
far as him writing both at the same time. I just mean that they're releasing together is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Considering those are two of the biggest, like you said, quote unquote, modern, Batman classics, storylines, both written by Jeff Loeb. I mean, yeah, both written by Jeff Loeb, and we're getting the sequel at the exact same time, pretty much.
Well, you know what's funny
Little
about that is
overlap.
it's almost like what's old is new again
Yeah.
because I mean you've got Jeff Loeb and unfortunately we don't have Tim Sale to join in
Yeah.
on that. But you still have his covers
Mhm.
and you've got everyone honoring the memory of Tim Sale throughout that book. And then you've got Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee coming back
Mhm.
with Scott Williams for Batman Hush 2. The old DC logo is back. I'm loving this nostalgia kick of DC
Yeah,
we're in
it's
right
been
now.
fun. It's
It
been it's
has been.
definitely been fun.
Yeah, as hopefully the DCU can continue that momentum. We'll
Hmm.
see.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wanted to go back and just talk about like discovering this book and your memories of it because I did not read this in 2002 as it was coming out or 2003. So when did you first read Batman Hush to your knowledge?
Well, to my knowledge, I've spoken about it before on the show, where when I was getting back into Batman comics, I went on IGN or something, GameStop.com, whatever it might have been. Um, and I found a list of top 10 Batman graphic novels.
Mm,
And I think Long Halloween was up there and Hush was up there. And I will say, going from like an early Batman story like Long Halloween and Year One, obviously, I tried going pretty much in order when I was reading them.
hmm
I didn't know how much continuity was involved in Hush, though. And I don't think I knew what the heck was going on when I originally read this book.
mm,
This was I mean, not to get into the story, but like, I think this might have been my introduction to Huntress. Like, I didn't even know who Huntress was when I read this book. This was really early on in my getting back into comics. And I don't think I even, like, in the grand scheme of things, this book was only 3 years old, maybe, when I read it, which is pretty
mm,
crazy because it felt old when I was starting to read it. I didn't
mm,
like think about it, I guess. But I had to have read it around 2005, 2006, I think. That's what I'm
hmm
assuming.
Yep. So very same for me. It was that period. after Batman Begins had come out, and I was fully on board with Batman again, and I was diving into, whatever I could find Batman, and I remember doing almost the exact same thing that you're talking about. I remember
Hmm.
going online and searching for, best Batman stories,
Yeah.
something along those lines. And Hush obviously came up with The Dark Knight Returns and, Long Halloween and all of these things that we know of to be classic Batman stories. In fact, you brought up IGN. Funny note here, IGN still has Batman Hush listed as number 10 of the 25 greatest Batman graphic novels of all time.
Well, just to, all right, so thank God for Amazon because my order history is still there. I purchased the Absolute Edition of Hush in September of 2006. Now, this is prior to me even knowing what an Absolute Edition was. But
Wow.
every time I found a collection of Hush, it was volume one and volume two.
Yep.
The Absolute Edition was the only way you could get both
The
volumes
complete
together.
volume.
Guess how much I paid for the Absolute Edition of Hush in
Oh, I gotta know this.
2006? $32.
Whoa.
Because that's why I bought it. I literally had no idea what I was buying. To me, it was just a hardcover copy for $32. And I'm dying that like that's how I stumbled across an Absolute Edition of Hush. Because it was just a way to, I remember it was just a way to get volume one and volume two together.
And
That
you got that on Amazon?
on Amazon in 2006 for 32.99.
It's unbelievable to me that Amazon was even a thing in 2006.
Yeah, we're not that old quite yet. Amazon's been, I mean, I guess, yeah, we're maybe that means we are old. I don't know, but yeah, 2006. It was probably more or less just books at the time.
hmm Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there is speaking of that, there's a new printing of Absolute Batman Hush coming this
Hmm.
year.
Not
Releases in
$32.
not $32. I think retail is 100, which
Yeah.
is honestly for retail not bad for an Absolute.
No, usually if it's more than like five or six issues, it's over $100. It's usually
Yeah.
125.
Yeah. And get it on organic price books. You won't pay 100.
Hmm.
You'll pay less than that for it,
Yeah.
especially if you use our promo codes. But yeah, so I did not get the Absolute until much later. I did pick up those volume one and two hardcovers, so the
Okay.
original hardcovers at the time. Um, and spoiler for how I feel about this book, this was unseated by Court of Owls when it came out as my favorite Batman story ever. So from when I read this in 2006 ish until 2011, this was my favorite Batman story. And to this day, I would consider it maybe a 1B. Like, I love this story. I think this is, I mean, we've heard people say it for years. If you're looking for a way to make a comic book Batman movie in live action, do Hush. I mean, I've heard person after person say it, and I can't argue it because there's so much. There's even if you just take out the villain plot of Hush, there's so much here that's so great with all the villains intermingling in and out, and just all the story beats are so good. And I think it cannot be understated how good Jim Lee's art is in this book. It defined Batman for a generation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll agree to that. And I'll go to your point on Court of Owls. I think prior to Court of Owls, and it's hard for me to even really choose between the two other than, our love for Greg Capullo. It would be hard to argue that this is not the most beautiful Batman book ever made as far as the
Yeah.
artwork goes. Um, and to your point with Hush, the character, he's kind of in the background the entire book. He's not even the focal point of the story because you don't know he's the mastermind. So everything else becomes what you're paying attention to.
hmm
So it's hard for me to bring this up, and the parallels with Long Halloween are very similar. It's the or the parallels are there, I should say, because it's obvious it's trying to sell the monthly book. So you have a villain of the month type of uh
Mm,
trope. But it's done different enough to me where it doesn't feel like he's just doing the same thing.
right.
Because I don't even think it's as, I mean, it's not even in your face in Long Halloween. It's kind of like an easy critique of the two books to say like, oh, it's just a villain of the month type of thing. But I think considering it's the same writer, they're clearly trying to do the same type of selling point.
Hmm.
It's pretty masterful that he's able to do something similar but different enough to where both of these books are considered top 10 Batman books of all time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because at face value, you could argue it's a one-trick pony and he's just doing the same thing over again, but he's not. He does a really good job of taking that and running with it and doing something new and something different and making it work along with the Jim Lee artwork, which is you can't emphasize enough how much that separates this from Long Halloween too. It's a completely different story than Long Halloween. I would be I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't at least bring up the criticisms of the similarities of the two before we
Well,
start gushing over the books
yeah,
or
and
book.
the similarities are there. I mean,
Hmm.
you've got a 12-month, 12 issue detective story
Yeah.
is what it is. And it's a mystery and you don't know who's pulling the strings in the background. And this whoever this person is that's pulling the strings is using different members of Batman's rogues gallery.
Hmm.
Or and this is where it starts to tweak a little bit. Not only in this one is it the rogues gallery, but some of the heroes as well are being
Yes.
used and pitted against Batman. So
And it's
yes,
not just like one for one per month. It seems like
yeah,
some come back, some take the forefront. There's different ways of selling this book um, than just new villain on the cover each month.
yeah. I would say there is a Jeph Loeb formula here, but it is
Hmm.
not the same story.
No.
But I mean, and we're gonna do this probably as long as the episode goes. But just to go back to the Jim Lee art, there are so it would be, I would say, almost impossible for me to pick out a favorite image from this story because there's so many.
Yeah, we can't do the Batman book club formula for
No,
this.
but how many?
I couldn't even pick a favorite cover, I don't think.
I was about to say, how many of these covers have become just iconic? And the crazy part is, I mean, some of these covers, which cover is it? I can't remember which
Well,
issue it is. The one with the poison ivy, with Batman with his cape spread and Catwoman kind of in the crucifix in
mhm.
the middle and the vines. They made a Funko Pop of that, of the cover.
Well, the Batman Nightwing page is that even I don't even know if that's a cover or just a splash page of them running towards towards your eyesight or your
Hmm.
eye line. It's I have a poster of it in my basement right here. I'm looking at like that's an iconic picture. So there is so much. So it's the cover of what issue is this?
615
Issue
is the
8
Batman
in the
Nightwing cover.
absolute the Batman Nightwing one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, some of these sold so well that they have completely unique second printing covers.
Yeah,
The
the
most
wraparounds.
the wraparounds. The biggest one is, which is so funny. The biggest one, which I have a graded copy of, signed by Jim Lee and Jeph Loeb, is the first issue, 608. This is the second printing that
Hmm.
you're seeing
And it's
that
worth more than the first printing.
is worth more than the
Yeah.
first printing
Yep.
because it went to second print, but they printed less of them than they did the first issue. Odd, but that's
And
what
you have
happened.
all the individual issues, don't you?
I do. I have every issue of Hush. So yeah, it's just wild the way that this brought so much attention to Batman. It boosted the sales of Batman to an unbelievable, percentage at the time. And have you ever heard the story of the bet that was made with Jim Lee about
No.
doing the art for this?
Mm-mm.
So, and I can't remember who bet him. It was somebody that he was with at Marvel when he was doing X-Men, and then was at DC as well when he was getting ready to do this.
Hmm.
Jim Lee was notorious for not getting art in on time.
Okay.
So there were delays, things like that, because Jim Lee was notorious for that. So whoever this was, and I can't remember, made a gentleman's bet of $100 that he would not be able to get these issues out on time. And he he took it very personally and made sure that he got it done. And then he collected the $100 in the form of a check and never cashed it. It is still to this day pinned above his artboard that he
That's
does.
funny. I
So
I do remember Jim Lee saying if he knew it was going to be such an iconic thing, he would have never put treads on the boots of the Batman because it became like his thing, and now he has to do the treads on the boots every time he draws Batman. He said that he said what a nightmare that is to draw.
I'm sure it's so intricate on the bottom of those
Yeah.
boots. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how much talent went into this story. But let's get into the story a little bit. So starting with we see things are just off from the beginning of this book. We've got a little boy that's been kidnapped. He is from a well-to-do family. There's been a ransom put on him, and we find out that Killer Croc is the culprit behind this kidnapping, which is very off for Killer Croc. It's not usually his MO. So Batman puts a stop to it. He gets the kid, he gets the money, but Catwoman makes off with the money. And this is one of the very interesting parts that I forget before I read it each time is that apparently this was in an era where they were trying to make Catwoman, you know, kind of that gray area between good and bad.
Mhm.
So she had not been committing crimes for a while. I always forget that until I read it in Batman's monologue, as you know, why would she do this? She's been
Yeah.
trying to go on the straight and narrow. But from here is when we start to realize that every one of that Batman is encountering, whether it be Killer Croc or Catwoman or Poison Ivy, all of these people are being manipulated by someone in the background, which is a great setup. And at the end of the first issue, we get Batman, his grapnel line is snapped by something and he falls and is severely injured. So, and that at the end of this, is it issue one or is it issue two where we meet Huntress, where she comes to save Batman?
It's issue two.
Yeah. So Huntress, who is clearly distrusted by the Bat family, maybe not so much Batman, but the Bat family, rescues Batman. He goes back to the cave and he is in dire straits. Alfred does what he can for him, but he needs more help. So they're discussing who they can bring in. And this is just, I love this little portion here. So Batman.
The Morse
Batman
code.
is tapping his finger on the side of the gurney to do Morse code to indicate Thomas Elliot is who they need to bring in. So they call in Thomas Elliot. He is a world-renowned surgeon. We find out he's a dear childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, and he is the only one who's going to be able to do this brain surgery on Bruce to save his life. So, Joe, this is one of the biggest complaints about this story that I hear because as much as people gush over it, there are complaints to be had. And the Thomas Elliot is the one that I hear most because everybody's like, well, it's so obvious that this guy we've never heard of that's coming in that was a childhood friend is going to be the villain.
Mm.
So when you read this for the first time, did that cross your mind? Because I'm going to be honest, maybe it's just me being naive. I never thought, I've never heard of this guy. He must be the villain.
Well, here's my response to that, if that is the case, because I honestly don't remember. I remember none of what I thought when I first read it. But
Sure.
if I were reading it when it was coming out, their answer to that while writing the book is they kill him off after issue 5 or 6.
Hmm.
And I think that was their way of saying, well, yeah, we know it was obvious that he should have been the villain, so we kill him off so it redirects everybody or misdirects everybody. And I
Yes.
think if I was reading it monthly, I would have no reason to believe that he wasn't dead after, the Joker quote unquote kills him or is set up to kill him. So I think everyone we hear that says that argument, they've known for 20 something years that he is the villain.
Yeah.
So again, I can't speak for it because I wasn't there when this stuff was happening and we didn't have the internet like we do now back when this book was coming out. We had it, but nobody was on like, discussing this stuff as much as they do now. So
Oh yeah, the good old internet. Let me tell you how bad this thing that you love is.
yes, of course, now the book is 20 something years old, we can all trash it. Although now it's cool to trash things as they're coming out, so who the hell knows anymore. But I just I don't know. It's comic books. That's what they do. They introduce a new character. You assume he's the villain, of course. Again, I think they did a good enough job of trying to misdirect you with the fake death to at least
Mhm.
make you think about it or think twice about it. And again, I wasn't there. I don't remember what it was like for me reading it, but even knowing he's the villain now, reading this for probably the fifth or sixth time that I've read this, I still go through the story and look for clues or look for hints of okay, I don't remember how he like and again I've read it, I still don't remember half the crap because my memory is shot. Um I'm like, okay, what's their explanation for him not being killed? Because it's pretty convincing that he's dead here. And I couldn't
Mhm.
remember, okay, was this Clayface? Was this just a red herring with the body? I couldn't remember any of that stuff. So even knowing all that stuff and looking for it, it's not there enough to make it hit you in the face completely.
No.
So I'm not going to criticize a book that's 20 something years old because I don't remember what it was like when it first came out.
Yeah. And I'll say, and I don't know why I remember this, but I remember reading this and thinking nothing of it, most likely because I had not kept up with comic books, and
Mhm.
at the time, who was I to know that Thomas Elliot had never been in the
That's a good
long
point too.
history of
Yeah.
Batman books, you know?
And I
So
think
so it
I'm sorry.
no, it was just something that I'd never crossed my mind as I was reading it. And again, like you said, I think they subverted expectations with killing Thomas Elliot in
Yeah.
the middle of the book. So, all
Well,
right, now
I think one of my nitpicks for a long time or for most of the book is, oh, how convenient. Bruce needs a doctor and he just happens to remember that he has a friend named Thomas Elliot. They kind of give a pretty cool explanation for that by the end of the book.
they do, and we're jumping around, but
It's
that's
hard to talk
okay.
about this book without jumping around, and it's been out for a long time. But like, I
Yeah,
think because the ending services the beginning so well that
yeah,
it works on multiple reads.
it does. Yeah, and I mean the point you're talking about, where when we discover it's Thomas Elliot because of Harold, because Harold has been contacted by Thomas Elliot, who is this world renowned surgeon, and he offers to fix Harold's body and give him his voice.
Hmm.
And of course, I mean, as much as Batman has done for him, that is something that Batman cannot do. So it's hard to say, if I was in
Yeah.
Harold's position, I wouldn't do that. But I mean, we find out that Harold, the techno whiz that he is, put subliminal messaging in the bat computer
Hmm.
so that those brief flashes of Thomas Elliot's picture would come up in the bat computer, and that was entering itself into Bruce's psyche, so
Yeah.
his mind immediately went there when he was in this dire position. So fascinating and a great story element, in my opinion. Jeph
Yeah.
Loeb, you're the man. But yeah, I mean, there's a line when Batman is discussing what's going on throughout the book, because this is after he has encountered Superman. Poison Ivy has used the kryptonite lipstick to manipulate Superman, and then we get the Joker. killing Thomas Elliot. There's a line in here, and I think Batman was talking to Nightwing, maybe. But he says, I can't, paraphrasing, I can't figure this out. This reaches as low as the Joker and as high as Superman. There's
Yeah.
it's affecting everyone I know, whether it be good or bad. I don't think and I think this is one of the reasons why Hush is still in the limelight today. He may not be as big as some of the other Rose Gallery, but he affected Bruce's entire existence throughout this book. I mean, everyone that he knew or fought was affected by this, whether it be Robin or Nightwing or Huntress or Catwoman or Superman, everybody was impacted. What other villain has done that on that scale?
Yeah, and I think what's cool about that is too, like you were saying, he's still in the limelight. And I also just I don't think he's overused either, but like when he shows up, it's a big deal. I know
Hmm.
there was an era in the, you know, what was it, like the late 2000s when they were doing like the streets of Gotham? Was that Genie's run? And then I don't remember if someone else was writing when Hush came back in the house. Is it House of Hush? And then
House of Hush and Heart of Hush.
yeah, well, Genie wrote Heart of Hush. I don't remember who wrote House of Hush. I think that was prior to Heart of Hush. They all kind of blend together in my mind. Sorry, but
I'd have to look at my omnibus. I can't
that
remember.
was the era where he was kind of used a little bit. But since then, he has not been used a lot. And I feel like if he were to show up again now, and I'm not reading current comics, but I feel like when he does show up now, there's a reason and it's a big deal. It's not, just like any other villain showing up. I know he was used in Batman Eternal, I believe,
Mm.
which was kind of like a fun retelling of a lot of the 90s stories. So that was a cool way of doing Hush. But yeah, like you were talking about with how it reached everyone. I loved how Batman was starting to question, like, okay, is there something to this happening while I'm starting a relationship with Catwoman? Is it a coincidence? Is it why my guard is down, or is it what's making my guard down? Like was one what came first type of deal. And I thought that was really interesting. And again, because it's almost fun to read this stuff because my memory is so bad. Like it
Because
works to
like
my benefit.
rediscovering it, yeah.
Yeah, when Robin is like attacking Catwoman in the Batcave, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, why does nobody complain about this? This is horrible. And then it's because it's an act. I'm like, okay, that makes more sense now.
Yeah.
But like, that's such a cool, interesting thing to show. Like, I love that dynamic between Tim and Bruce, where they're like, I like she bought it, like good, and like it was just an act to make sure they know what's going on, and because Bruce knows he can trust Tim, but he's like 99% sure he can trust Catwoman, but he can't bank on it and he needs Tim to help him to try to figure out what's going on. And even if he can trust Catwoman, he knows that the minute he sends Catwoman out of there, he's going to get to the bottom of it one way or the other, which was really a fun way to move that plot going or move it forward and see what was going on. And that's one thing with this book. It's a quick read. I don't think it's like a quick read because there's not a lot of story. I think it's just a quick read because you want to get through it and it's such a fun read and it's is it 12 issues or 13 issues? It's 12, right? 12
It's 12,
issues.
yeah.
And we don't get a lot of Hush. Hush doesn't even show up in the like you don't even visibly see Hush until the end of issue 3, I believe.
Yeah, and
Um
and even when you do start to see him, you see him like on the roof of a building.
or you see
Um,
Two-Face as Hush or you
mhm.
see Clayface as Hush. You don't actually see Hush until the
Clayface, or Clayface as Jason Todd
as
as
Jason
Hush.
Todd. Yeah, like I don't think you actually see the real Hush until the end.
Yeah,
Or I mean, if you want to count every time you see Tommy Elliott,
yeah, and there's so many misdirects in this.
yeah.
Whether it be that the death of Tommy Elliott.
But it never gets like cumbersome either. Like
Mm-mm.
you never get
Well,
tired of the Mr. X. It never becomes like, oh,
no,
here's another one, here's another one. Like it always just keeps you on your toes, but keeps you interested.
and this is that kind of story where it's each each issue ends And when you read it collected, it's so hard. And I did this as I was rereading it. It's so hard to get to the end of an issue and stop and
Yeah.
not go to immediately to the next one.
Yep.
I cannot imagine when this was coming out, and I can't remember if during this time if it was monthly or bi-monthly.
I'm assuming it was monthly because the dates you gave would line up to 12 issues and one per month.
Yeah, from October to September, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't imagine going monthly, like getting
Yeah.
this book each month and not and having to wait another 30 days, to
Well,
to read the next one.
thank God it was the monthly title because there weren't any delays. It's not
Yeah.
like it is now where when you have these specials that come out and you don't know when the next issue is going to come out. It's
Yeah.
so frustrating. So luckily, and even with the new one, they'll hopefully hit their dates because it is part of the monthly, and the monthlies don't usually get delayed.
Yeah. So and I think we talked about it during our Jason Todd episode, but I want to circle back to Jason Todd being revealed at one point as who we think is Hush.
Hmm.
Um, this has been something that's been very controversial in Batman circles for years because at the time it was written as Clayface was impersonating Jason Todd
Yeah.
from as a manipulation from Hush from Tommy Elliott um, to even more mess with Batman's mind.
Hmm.
It has since been retconned that Jason Todd was there, and at some point he switched with Clayface.
Yes.
So, not that it matters because one is now canon.
And wasn't it actually retconned by the end of this book? Because they say the body's missing and all that. Like I think by the end of this book coming out, they probably made that decision.
I think
Or
it's
that's
left
me kind of reading the
ambiguous.
tea leaves. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's left ambiguous as to because Tommy Elliott did so much to mess with Batman. Who's to say he wouldn't have gone as far as digging up
Yeah.
Jason Todd and disposing of him or
And
whatever.
also for the record, I don't think I knew who Jason Todd was when I read this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think I knew about. Oh no, 2006. No, I did. I did. I learned about that early on, but
Yeah.
I learned that later in life. I did not know that when I was a kid.
So, which do you prefer? Do you prefer that it was Clayface the entire time, or do you prefer that Jason Todd made his first reappearance here?
Well, I have two answers for that. My
Okay.
first answer would be for the book as is, I like it being Clayface.
Hmm.
Ironically, I think if you were gonna do like a one-off, maybe an animated movie, you could combine the Hush story and the Red Hood story and bring them back like this and
Mm.
do something kind of twisty like that instead of what we got with the animated movie for Hush. I think that might make a little bit more sense
Hmm.
where you could have had the big reveal actually be Jason Todd, and that could be pretty interesting. Um, I don't know. This story and the Red Hood story get really muddy because it all becomes part of Infinite Crisis, which I think that's why the Red Hood movie is so good, is because it was able to just be a standalone thing where the Red Hood story in the comics, it takes a break halfway through and goes into Infinite Crisis, and that's when all the crazy stuff happens with him coming back to life and the reasons and all that, and what is it, Superboy punching the source wall, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Where I like the Lazarus Pit version better, I think.
I do too. Um, and I think that's one of the reasons why Under the Red Hood, the movie, is so good
Yeah.
because it makes so much sense as to how he could have returned. Um, I I've gone back and forth on this over the years, but I like the idea that it is Jason. It's really Jason Todd at one point because the conversation between Batman and Jason,
Works.
it works. It
Yeah.
feels like so good of a lead in to Under the Hood. Um,
I like that he never says Bruce, though. I like that he leaves it
yeah.
ambiguous. So correct me if I'm, or for refresh my memory, then How did he get involved? Did Thomas Elliot bring Jason in, or did Jason do it on his own? Because I don't remember.
I honestly, I'd have to go back and because you don't get an explanation in Hush itself, and it's been
No.
so long, I can't remember. I'd have to go
Okay.
back and
Yeah,
read.
I haven't read Under the Red Hood in a few years.
But yeah, I prefer it being Jason and switching off with Clayface. I mean, either way, you've got Clayface throughout this book, kind of leaving red herrings because
Hmm.
he is the dead Thomas Elliot in the alley.
Yeah.
He switches off and he is Jason Todd at one point. And
Hmm.
they talk about if you check Jason's casket, I guarantee you'll
There's clay in there.
find
Yeah.
there's clay residue. So Clayface is pretty integral to the story here, but I like thinking that it's actually Jason at one
Hmm.
point.
That's one thing I'll go back to not remembering a lot of the stuff from the book. This book leads into a lot of pretty big stories going forward between the Jason Todd stuff, the Two-Face stuff. I totally forgot that this is where Two-Face gets cured, or where
Mhm.
he has the plastic surgery to become just Harvey Dent for the book that comes out after Zero Year. I mean, not 0 years, Zero Hour. Zero Hour? Which one is that? Oh, crap. 1 year later. Sorry, 1 year later.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
those books had that same damn title. 1 year later after Infinite Crisis. So this is prior to Infinite Crisis. And then when he comes back after 1 year later and he's, running for mayor, I believe he's like back as the DA and stuff. And that's a pretty crazy story. And I couldn't remember like where that came from. Reading it, I almost felt like it came out of the blue that he's, healed, and totally forgot that he played such a major part in this book.
yeah. He does. And here's a hot take for you. I prefer the way that Two Face reappears to society here than I do the way they did it in The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's sort of similar. Like he
Mhm.
gets plastic surgery where he's whole. He's bald in both
Yeah.
in both of those instances. But it makes so much sense that the world's most renowned surgeon can fix Two Face.
Yeah.
But I like that he's I mean, is he completely back at a moral center where he's, altruistic district attorney Harvey Dent? No, but he didn't immediately return to heinous crime like he did in The Dark Knight
Yeah.
Returns. There's still enough of Harvey Dent here that I really like that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd
And
really like that too.
and he's the one that kind of brings the entire story to a close at the end.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know if I've read the beginning of this story like numerous times because all of my memories from this book end by like issue 8. Like I like I remember the first 8 issues pretty vividly.
mhm,
And then once we get towards the end and it all starts to wrap up, I don't know if it's because like the journey is better than the destination. I mean, I think the ending is good, but I
mhm.
think the fun is in the beginning and getting to that point. And then once it gets to the end, my brain is kind of like, okay, I'm here, and now let's go on to the next story. But
Yeah,
it's cool to, like I said, read this again and kind of feel like I'm reading it for the first time again because there is so many cool tie-ins to other stuff too. I remember the Clayface Jason Todd stuff. I'm not, that bad. Where I think it's actually Jason Todd, and I'm like, whoa, Jason's back. I'm not that
yeah.
bad. But I like that, the Two-Face stuff totally threw me for a loop. I had no recollection of that. And the Harold stuff, man, talk about like a moment in time. I mean, Harold was such a big part of the 90s comics. I don't remember when he left comics. Like, was this like a random thing for people that read this? Because he was like part of Nightfall and stuff like that, right? That was really when Harold played a huge part.
Oh gosh, I can't remember when he came in, but I mean, there was a long stretch of time where he was an integral part of the Batman
Yeah,
stories.
but if you,
Um, yeah,
I'm trying to remember like when that stopped.
I imagine it can't have been too long before this.
I mean, you would assume because you don't want to lose people by bringing up something that they're not going to get. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about it now or if you want to wait, but that was one of my discussions with you, or something I wanted to discuss with you is, because we're talking about this prior to Hush 2 coming out, how do you make a sequel to this when there have already been arguably four sequels to it, three or four
Hmm.
sequels to it, but not direct sequels because they were different artists, different writers. How do you market something as a direct sequel to this, where continuity is completely different now? Characters in this don't even exist anymore in our continuity. Like Harold, Harold's not doesn't exist. Alfred plays a huge part in this. He's dead, as far as I know.
Hmm.
Um, Huntress is completely different. She plays a big part in this. The Catwoman Batman relationship has gone really different than this.
Yeah,
There's a lot of, I don't know. I'm very curious how they're going to play it. And also without bringing up Heart of Hush, without bringing like, I don't know how they're going to play it. Is it just going to be a monthly Batman title that brings back Hush and we're off and running? Or are they going to really try to make this a direct sequel to this book?
well, I think we're in a similar situation right now as to before this book came out. Batman needed a shot in the arm at this point. I mean, it's the reason that they brought Jeph Loeb and Jim Lee together in the first place. Batman needed he needed a boost.
Mhm.
Hush gave Batman a huge boost. It, increased sales, all that stuff. We're in a similar period now where Batman needs a boost, comics wise. Um, so I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know how they're going to approach it, but seeing as they're going to have so many eyes on this, so much attention, I mean, a couple of weeks ago they had sold over 400,000 copies already,
Mm.
pre-sold of
Yeah.
of the first issue of Batman Hush 2. Spoiler, this is the first book that I have pre-ordered in years. I'm
Oh, you would
I'm
really?
I'm excited about it. I wanted a physical copy of this.
Okay.
So I pre-ordered some copy because I don't have a shop near me that I can
Yeah.
go to. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would hope and I would think that I don't know how they're going to approach it continuity wise, but I think it's going to be as long as you have knowledge of Hush of this story, the original story. I think they're going to make it where you can jump in
Yeah.
and take off. How they're going to do that, I don't know.
So I just feel like
Um,
Alfred's death alone is such a major part of the continuity now, where if you read the this book and then go into Hush 2, it doesn't work.
Boy, wouldn't that be a way to kick off issue one?
I
Alfred's
or
back.
or I was wondering if they were going to literally bring him back like the issue prior to Hush 2,
Mm,
like to end the prior run. Um and again, it that's just me being curious. I think they'll be fine and I'll be fine with
yeah.
whatever they do. It's more just the curiosity of it because it's a weird thing to say it's a sequel when we've gotten so many and it's in continuity where like the Long Halloween you could do a sequel to it because like it's kind of its own thing. You know, like
Hmm.
it's not like Elseworlds or anything, but it just kind of takes place as its own little avenue.
Well, it's a period in time. You can say it was within the
Yeah.
next several years after year
Hmm.
one. But yeah, I mean, getting back to the main story here, I really wanted to talk for a few minutes about Riddler and his involvement in this story. Jeff Loeb loves tossing Riddler into stories like this in a brief but impactful way. And it's so funny. Like, yes, Hush pulled the strings the entire time, but I would say his co-conspirator was Riddler.
Hmm.
Because, we find out that Riddler now knows who Batman, he knows who Batman is. We know that Riddler had terminal cancer. He used a Lazarus pit to cure himself, and he has been working with Hush to set up this entire thing. Um, Now the Batman Hush animated film took this to a whole nother level, and I think to its detriment. The role, so far as how many pages Riddler's in the book, would seem small, but I think out of all the villains in the book, maybe even more than Hush himself, Riddler has the most impact.
He definitely has more. I mean, he's in the book more than Hush, I would argue. Um, I mean, I'm not counting the pages or anything like that, but yeah, he is a major factor. And you're right. I don't want to harp on the animated movie too much because I think it just took it too far and it made it too
Hmm.
goofy. Like
Yeah.
instead of just embracing that he was Hush, you could argue in this book that he was Hush. I see where they got the idea, where
Hmm.
like he's the mastermind. I get why they did it. It was the execution was just really bad, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, the Riddler plays such a huge part in this. Again, like you could argue, and if you love the Riddler, I think it's a fun argument. He is kind of Hush. He's the one that's manipulating everything. He's manipulating Hush more than Hush realizes. And he's kind of pulling the strings and it really is a fun Riddler story where he doesn't get in the grand scheme of things that much time, but he
Hmm.
gets enough time to really make an impact. And you don't think of it as a Riddler story in the grand scheme of things, but like when people say like name a great Riddler story, I mean this doesn't come up because
Yeah.
it's not his story, it's Hush's story. But you could argue he is so important to what happens in every inch of this book.
Yeah. And I also love that. I mean, he is completely got one over on Batman here because he knows the greatest riddle of all. He knows, the true identity of Batman is Bruce Wayne. But Batman has the it's one of the best parts of the book, the entire book, is Batman's rebuttal to Riddler knowing. He asks him a very simple riddle.
Hmm.
Riddler says everybody knows that one and gives him the answer. And Batman says, exactly. You know, what good is a riddle that everybody knows the answer to? Which really throws or Riddler for a loop because now he can't have that power if he lets go of the fact that he knows who Batman is, because then everybody else would know. And I also love that not only does Batman doesn't stop there, he puts it one further. You've used a Lazarus pit. You led me to, you led to the threat of Talia al Ghul. Don't you, don't you think you've got a problem if Ra's al Ghul finds out you were behind all this? So he not only has him over the barrel once, but twice,
Yeah.
which is great because
Yeah,
even if Riddler was tempted to give up that information, Batman's got that ace in the hole of Ra's al Ghul.
yeah, the tying that's where the masterfulness of the storytelling lies is like you can almost argue that like Roz and Talia kind of come out of nowhere in this story. That's like the one that's kind of like a tangent a little bit. Um, but it does play a big part. It's just like again, okay, Lazarus Pit. Where's that tie in with this and what's going on? Now I'm trying to remember like how that all happened and whatever. But it's just again, it's a fun way to bring in Roz, and you said it's a fun way to have another ace in the hole against the Riddler too.
Hmm.
And I love like I don't remember Talia being a thing with Lex Luthor at all outside of this book. I don't remember if that was I remember Luthor being president. Obviously, that happens during around the time of No Man's Land.
There's another story I read recently, and I can't remember which one it was, but it had to have been during this time because Talia was also running LexCorp in that story, and I can't place which one it was. But
Hmm.
that does make this kind of a snapshot in time because this book takes place during that Lex Luthor
Yeah.
presidential run, and it makes sense because he can't run a corporation while he's president.
Hmm.
So of course, who do you get to run something? Another one of the worst people in DC Comics.
One little nitpick I don't know why it bothers me. I hate that they call her Talia Head instead of Talia Al Ghul.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Like instead of like Demon's Head, she's Talia Head, not Talia Al Ghul. I don't know why that's a thing. It seems so clunky to me and so weird.
it that is I don't that's of its time as well because they definitely don't maintain that today.
Yeah, I've this might be the only book I've ever noticed that before.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, the interesting part to me is that with the end of this book, everything that Batman has learned makes him question everything else. Like you were saying earlier, I think one of the most interesting parts is I think they did the best Batman Catwoman love story that I've seen in
Yeah.
comics. And at the end, Batman doesn't even know if he can trust it. Like it really, to anybody else, it wouldn't matter. I feel the way I feel, and that's how it is. Batman can't just go with that, you know, as
Hmm.
much as Catwoman wants him to, and basically asks him, what does it matter? He cannot get over the fact that, his feelings for Catwoman may have been another manipulation, which is fascinating to me. So much better than the Tom King Catwoman stuff.
I'm not
Sorry.
going there. I'm not going there.
Sorry.
Um,
Um,
the one thing that's really weird to me too with the animated film is I forgot about this with the book. I actually like the way it's done in the movie where Catwoman's completely fine killing Riddler and it's Batman that doesn't want to, and that's what kind of breaks them up at the end of the movie. In this, she's more trying to protect him from
mhm.
killing the Joker at one
Yes.
point. And I I'm not saying I dislike the version in the book because I think that that shows her care for Bruce because I don't think she cares at all if the Joker lives or dies, but she doesn't want Bruce to do that because she knows what that would do to him.
Yeah. As
Um,
well as, I mean, Jim Gordon, same thing.
yes,
These
yeah,
they don't
it's
care. They
obvious
don't
for
care about
Jim.
the Joker.
Yes, I think it's more obvious for Jim doing something like that. I think it was more surprising to me that Catwoman would do something like that because she's had no quarrel with killing before,
Mhm.
but she again is just trying to protect Bruce.
Yeah.
Where Jim Gordon is doing it because he believes you shouldn't just execute him. He's doing it for himself too. I mean, that bring the one thing this book does a really good job. I mean, there's a lot of things the book does a really good job of, but I love the quick little catch-ups of huge moments in Batman's history. You know,
Hmm.
Barbara's being shot by the Joker. Um, obviously Jason dying. The cool little artsy flashbacks that they do. And one of them being where the heck was I going with this? Um crap, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about prior to that? It was Catwoman. Oh, Sarah Essen. Sarah Essen being killed by the Joker. That was the one that
Hmm.
was okay, good. Bring people up to speed on that. And that is to me one of the most horrifying things that Joker has ever done. But it's also something that's not regularly known by a lot of people. Like that's kind of like a forgotten thing where everyone knows Barbara, everyone knows, you know, Jason. Him shooting Sarah Essen in No Man's Land is how that's kind of the one that's forgotten because I guess Sarah isn't a character that people outside of that era remember.
Hmm.
But man, I love that they bring that back too, and how Jim is like, I didn't kill him for that. You're definitely not going to kill him for Tommy Elliott.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there, one of the great things that this story does well, and I think one of the reasons it resonated so well at the time, because even if you hadn't been reading Batman comics for a long time,
Yeah, like I
this
wasn't.
story, this story provides basically Batman's greatest hits
Yes,
up to this point. So
with
it gives you enough information to be caught up in the story.
it gives you enough exposition without it being too much. Like it's not too exposition heavy where it gets boring.
Hmm.
Where we skip over things when we read it because now we know all the expositions. No, it's enough to where you get what you need, but it still makes it interesting for us having read it how many times, still getting those backstories, still getting the great art to go with those flashbacks. They're not just telling you, oh yeah, Joker killed so and so. No, they're showing us a really cool picture on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's
Now
because
that
Batman's thinking about it.
and that could be an approach for Hush 2.
Mhm.
Could be what are the greatest hits of Batman in the 20 plus years since the first Hush book?
That would be pretty interesting. Yeah, to kind of it
Yeah.
might be good for us because we haven't read the monthlies in a while.
Yeah.
Um, I know you tried reading a little bit of the Zdarsky run. I haven't read anything since Tomasi. I've been out for a while.
Yeah.
So I would be really interested to see how they do that. Did not pre-order the floppy. I feel like that's like going back to an addiction where I don't want to even open up that can of worms.
I don't know that I'll continue. I really wanted to have the first issue. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes past that. Um, but yeah, I mean, from beginning to end, I mean, this story is just it. It's hard for a comic book. I'd say to really keep you on the edge of the seat, especially when you're reading like monthly or whatever. But no matter how many times I've read this story, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. Like I said, it's really hard to read through this story and stop at the end of an issue.
Hmm.
Like I was reading it the other night and I was like, I gotta go to bed. But I got to the end of an issue and I was like, man, I want to read the next one. I mean, it's that good.
Yeah.
So and 20 plus years later, it still holds up as
Yeah.
that good.
And 12 a
Um,
12 issue story for me to actually sit and read the absolute is not an easy feat. Usually I'll succumb to the digital or something while I'm working or taking a break or just sitting on the couch. I'll pick up the tablet and read it digitally. I made a point to come down here and read the absolute because it deserves the the attention from the artwork and everything. And I love just being able to sit here and look at this. And you're right, like I read it in 2 days. I didn't quite read it in one sitting, but I split it up over 2 days, a couple hours here and there, and I'm glad that I did.
yeah, yeah, for sure, and same here. Um, but yeah, I mean that feels like, and there's gonna be things I know when we get off of this call and we stop recording. There's gonna be things. Gosh, I wish I'd have mentioned that. But that happens every time. But before we fully wrap it up here, is there anything that's glaringly obvious that you think we missed that we should discuss in this?
I don't think so. I think, we talked about how um talking about the continuity and talking about the recaps and ways to, do the exposition. I think it works even like I said, I didn't know much about Batman comics at all when I read this originally. A character like Huntress, this book made me question like, oh, who's Huntress? I need to find out about her. And she's become one of my favorite Batman side characters. I've always had a thing for Huntress, and this might be one of my favorite books with her in it because it was probably the first one. Um, it's become kind of her iconic look too
Hmm.
from the way Jim Lee draws her. I mean, honestly, any character that Jim Lee draws is going to be one of their iconic looks, I'm sure. So that would be for me probably the only thing we really didn't spend a lot of time on. But other than that, I mean, yeah, we're gonna definitely miss stuff. A 12 issue book that has so many iconic moments and so many fun things. Um,
And
you
I'll
know,
say to your point about Jim Lee's versions here, uh, other than Joker, because I think Joker is just a tad extreme in
Joker's
this.
the only one that's something about his nose.
Yeah,
It's just a little too much.
but I mean, even to me, like his version of Killer Croc here, even though Croc is like mutated and like all kinds of nasty,
Yeah,
I love this version of Croc. I think this is
agree.
my favorite version of Croc.
So I never noticed this before. The cover of issue, it's either 11 or 12 in the book. It might be 12. Um, the Joker's shirt. Have you ever noticed the Joker's shirt where the Riddler is holding the chess pieces?
Mm-mm.
Riddler's holding chess pieces and he's got Hush as like the chess piece. And there's a Joker shirt. The Joker's wearing a shirt that says I killed Jason Todd and all I got is this lousy t-shirt. I've
Oh,
never noticed that before, but I'm dying. I just happened to turn to the page and look at it while we were talking, and just classic Joker. That is pretty.
that's a
Yeah.
cover?
If it's not a cover, it's either a transition in the absolute. It might be just a transition in the absolute because it
I know the image. I just didn't know it was maybe it's an alternate cover. Maybe it's a variant.
maybe they don't specify in these absolutes what the covers are. So if it's the final issue, that would be Batman
19.
619.
Yeah, because the standard
So
cover
it's an
has
alternate cover. It's not the cover.
yeah,
It's an
because the
alternate
standard
cover.
has Batman and Tim and Barbara on a roof.
Yes. So it's the alternate cover.
Yeah. That is a great image. I know the one you're talking about though. That's a great
Yeah.
image. I've never noticed Joker's t-shirt though. I'm gonna have to look for that.
That might be my one nitpick with the absolute is they don't um it's not like while you're reading the issues, the standard is always the one that transitions.
Hmm.
It's kind of random.
Yeah.
And then there's the rest of the covers in the back.
Yep. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the one thing we didn't really mention that I'll kind of wrap up on here is, and I didn't think it was hugely important to mention that Hush, quote unquote, dies at the end because we know there's Heart of Hush and House of Hush and several Hush follow-ups here. But yeah, I mean, to end it on kind of a cliffhanger there of supposedly Two-Face killed Hush, we
Hmm.
know it's comic books. Nobody's ever truly dead. So I never took that at face value. I always assumed Hush would return in
Yeah.
some form or fashion. But yeah, I mean, 20 years later, or a little over 20 years, we have Hush 2 coming, and we'll always have this as a classic Batman story. So, Joe, wrap it up here. Give me your final thoughts on Batman Hush.
It's it's up there. It's up there with the top Batman stories ever. It's one that I can read anytime because I think, listen, we always are going to prioritize story, but when the art is this good, you can even forgive a bad story sometimes. I can I can literally just look at this book and not read any of the words and have a great time.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that that's a critique on the story itself. I love the story, but this is definitely one of the most beautiful Batman books ever done. The story fits the art perfectly. The art fits the story perfectly. Um, and it's a great, you know, just it's just it's Batman in his prime, which is also a fun thing with these stories where sometimes it's like, Long Halloween is an early Batman or Dark Knight Returns is a retired grizzled Batman. This one is Batman in his prime. He's got all of his history. He's got all the Robins in there other than your buddy. Not there yet, but so
They'll have him at their availability in the new one.
yes, they will. So we'll see how that works in too. See if they even acknowledge Tim Drake in this one. Uh, but yeah, I just can't recommend it enough. Nothing can be said more than's already been said about it. Everyone knows how good the story is. I'm sure there are people that are going to nitpick it or critique it, but whatever, that's not what we do. Let's be honest. We're not going to cover a book if we don't love it, and
Yeah.
this was definitely one that fits that bill.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. This is, I mean, again, it, it took Court of Owls to knock this off the pedestal for me as my absolute favorite Batman story. And it's still, I mean, when I read this one, when I revisit, it makes me question that positioning. But yeah, I mean, solid. One of my all-time favorite Batman stories. And to me, I mean, Jeff Loeb has got so much going for him, but this is another notch in his belt. And in my personal opinion, this is Jim Lee. This is his legacy. Is Batman Hush. Yes, I know there's a lot of people that absolutely love his run on X-Men, and he did a lot to launch Image Comics, but to me, when you mention Jim Lee, the images from this book are what comes to mind. And, one of one of my favorite artists doing my absolute favorite character and just knocking it out of the park outside of the amazing story. That's what my mind goes to all the time is just the images that have been burned into my brain from this story. So, I mean, yeah, I think this will always go down as one of my absolute favorites. And you know what? If Hush 2 is half as good as this story is, I'll be really happy. I'm not expecting it to be on the level of this book. That's kind of hard to do. But if it's half as good, I'll be really happy.
Yeah, I just want it to be entertaining. That's all. I don't
Exactly.
need it to be like this one. We know the art is going to be exceptional, which is
Hmm.
enough to get us involved at least, and the anticipation is enough to get us in there. You almost don't want him to take too big of a swing and miss, kind of like the movie. It's almost like, what do you do? If you're
Yeah.
going to take a swing, you better hit it out of the park. So I almost will rather him play it safe and just give us a fun time, which is sad. But or if you're going to hit it, if you're going to take a
You
swing,
know,
just nail it.
that's a tough area because if they play it safe, everybody will beat them up for playing it safe.
I
So
know. It's
So
tough,
it's so
but
hard.
I'm looking forward to it. I might wait. I'm gonna wait till at least DC Universe Infinite to read them, or maybe wait till it's over. I'm not sure. I'll see how it's going and see what it is. But I'm definitely gonna read it. Like I'll probably have it timed out so when the final issue comes, I'll definitely be ready to read that.
Nice. Well, it'll be definitely something that once it's all wrapped up will be a fun episode to talk about one way or the other.
Definitely.
All right. Well, Joe, that's a good a place as any to end it for this episode. So thank you again for joining me. This was a really fun one. I've been looking forward to this since I flipped the last page on the book the other day. So thank you again, and why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yep. Thank you. You guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as J411, and on Facebook as Joe Fornerato, Fornarotto. And I'm looking forward to discussing the Batman films next time we get on here for number 100. Like you said, God willing, we'll be on here soon enough, and I can't wait. That's going to be a really fun one.
Yep, that's going to be a great time. But as for myself, you can find my personal accounts on Instagram, X, and Threads. Just search me Carter 89. That's me Carter 89. Same for Letterboxd, me Carter 89. The show can be found on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads at tfrbatpod. If you're looking for a way to support the show, the best and easiest way to support us is to leave us a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. If you leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts, we will read those on the show. We read emails as well, so if you'd like to send us an email, you can shoot those to tfrbatpod@gmail.com. Next episode is 100, as we said again, so if you'd like to participate in the ranking, make sure you send your ranking of the Batman live action movies to either our email or comment on the post that we're going to be putting on our social media with your rankings or anything that you'd like to bring up about our 100 episodes. If you're looking for another way to support the show, you can go to redbubble.com, search Shop TFR, all one word, and find our logos created by Justin Kowalski on all kinds of merchandise there. Our theme song was composed by Gaurav Venkateswar, and his music can be found at gbtunes.com. Make sure you use the link in the description of this podcast, go to Organic Price Books, save yourself some money on some awesome collected editions, including various versions of Batman Hush, and support this show as you do so. That's going to do it for this episode of TFR. We will see you guys next time for episode 100, but until then, make sure you keep that bat signal lit and pointed skyward. Batman was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane and is the sole property of Warner Brothers Discovery. The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast, is in no way associated with DC Comics, DC Studios, or Warner Brothers Discovery. The thoughts and opinions of the participants of this show are their own and do not reflect the companies that they work for. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.